Hi, folks. I'm Lydia Rogue with Microcosm Publishing here with Jessie Kwak to talk about her book, From Chaos to Creativity. Do you want to give a quick introduction, Jessie?
Yeah. Hey, everybody. So From Chaos to Creativity, which I have prepared for, I have it with me. It is essentially a how to get things done guide for creative people. The idea is, all of our brains work a little bit differently. No one size fits all process is going to work for everybody. And so I essentially took everything that I had read and researched over the years about productivity and then interviewed a bunch of creative people and friends and experts and came up with a guide that helps you kind of choose your own productivity method that works for you. So a choose your own adventure guide to coming up with a system that works for you in normal times and hopefully helps get you back on track during chaos times.
Thank you. So I've got a few questions prepared for you, but at any point, if anybody who's currently watching has any questions, I am monitoring the chat and I can work them in whenever feels natural, or if you want to save them till the end, that works too. But speaking of chaos, I feel like one of the biggest things that everybody has been talking about lately is how quarantine has affected day-to-day life and productivity. So how are you doing, first of all?
Today I'm doing pretty good. As we were kind of chatting a little bit before this started, and I was like, I never know how to answer that question anymore, because it's like, yes, I feel like now I'm fine, but nothing's fine. And I don't know. It's what it is what it is right now. But the first few weeks, first month it was rough. It was like this shock to the system. I work from home and have for the last 6 years, and I don't get out of my house much anyway. So in theory, I was like, this will be fine for me. I had also been traveling a ton in December, January, February. So seeing my entire calendar disappear for March was actually kind of a relief. But at the same time, there's just this crushing, oh my God, what's happening? What's the world coming to? How should I even be creating art? Like, I'm writing a sci-fi novel with gunfights and gangsters, and I'm just like, why? Like, what is the purpose of this in this time, right? So the first few weeks were really, really rough. I was also really busy with work, so it's like I didn't even have a chance to process. But I don't know. Now I'm kind of settling into things, and work has got a little bit calmer, and life has gotten more of a rhythm, and I'm staring at the computer a lot more because everybody wants to hang out online. But got my computer glasses that I wear normally. So that's how I am. Long answer.
No, that's a good answer. Yeah, it's always a tough question. I feel like, how are you? Do you want to spill your guts to the internet, especially right now, or do you want to But anyway, you did bring up though my next question in part, how, especially since you work from home all the time, and how do you think your productivity systems have changed since you've been staring at the computer most of the day? Do you find it harder to strike a work-life balance? Things like that. How do you remain productive without it overwhelming you, I guess?
Yeah. So, I definitely am finding it harder to strike a work-life balance, even though that seems like it shouldn't have changed. But I realize how much of my balance was me getting out of the house. And, if I feel overwhelmed by, I've got way too many household chores, my living and working in the same environment, it's like your entire house is a to-do list in one way. So leaving the house was how I left that to-do list behind. And, like I would go, if I was feeling frazzled in the morning, I could just go to the coffee shop and work from there, but I can't do that anymore. So I've had to really learn how to find more internal mechanisms of coping with feeling overwhelmed by the tasks around the house as well as work tasks. And I also, I realized just yesterday, like I have worked every single weekend since this started, because like, what else am I going to do? I also was trying to finish up the draft of my next novel. So I finished that draft this week. So I am feeling like I can let off the gas a little bit, but I was like, wait a second. I didn't used to work every weekend, like, and I'm not that much busier. It's just I don't have anything else to do. So what else would I do? It's like I'm not going to go like hang out with my friends this weekend, so I might as well sit in front of my computer and work. So I'm really struggling with how to balance that currently. You also asked how my productivity system has changed, and that has gotten, I would say, more forgiving. That's something that I had to kind of figure out early, is like, I have a tendency to be like, okay, I need to do these 10 things today, and I know I'm not going to get them all done, but I do need to, they'll still be on my list and be this anxiety hovering over me. Like, that's just how I worked, right? And I realized, like, okay, I'm not going to get up and exercise every day anymore, and that's fine. Don't worry about it. Like, okay, I spent all day reading a book instead. That's fine. Don't worry about it. So I have been a lot more just like, oh, it's cool, Jessie. It's fine. Don't worry. Like, you didn't get that thing done. It's fine. Nobody cares if you got that thing done or not. Oh, there's dishes in the sink. Don't worry about it. So I've been saying that over and over again. It helps that, so my husband usually travels for work, and that's the other thing that has changed about this, is now he's at home with me full time, which is wonderful. Like, it's like, this has been such a good thing for our relationship. But he's also at home all the time, whereas I'm used to long periods of him not being here. But at least with him here, like, he can be like, no, relax, it's fine. And he's helped be that voice of like, just play a video game for a little bit. It'll be okay. So.
That's awesome. Yeah, I feel that on the like, just whatever, we'll take it as it comes today, because it's just been a lot. So, like, do you have advice for people who might be picking up your book right now, or have picked it up in the last couple of weeks, just being like, I have my life is entirely chaos right now. I need a way to build a productivity system so that I can channel that. Do you have additional advice or different advice based on what you've learned since you wrote the book, but also in the last month and a half in quarantine?
Yeah, I mean, I think the compassion advice, like what I was just talking about, would be my biggest thing to keep in mind as you are, if you're trying to figure out a productivity system, or just like a way of getting your stuff done right now. Just be kind to yourself. I was listening to, do you listen to the Sawbones podcast at all? Oh, it's fantastic. It's like a marital tour of misguided medical history, I think is the tagline. And she's a doctor and he's a comedian. And anyways, they're just really fun. But they were doing like a Q&A this week about COVID. And somebody had asked, like, so this brain fog that we all feel right now, what is that? Is there a medical reason for that? And she was basically like, okay, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? You've got your basic survival at the bottom. you've got your self-actualization at the top. And most of us are hanging out up here, right? Like, we're doing okay. We're trying to figure out how to write our novel or paint or find time for our art or whatever it is. And that's the self-actualization point of the pyramid. You have the capacity to do that because you've got all your basic needs net up to there. But right now, like, even though you might still have a roof over your head, you might still have plenty of food, you might have a family around you, like, your brain is in survival mode because your brain is hearing, like, if I walk out the door, I could catch this thing and die. My family could catch this and die. Like, your brain is thinking constantly, people I love, I am in danger. And so even though, like, I've got it great right now, like, we don't have kids, so we don't have that distraction. I'm like basically living my hermit dream. And my brain is saying, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And it doesn't matter how many times I tell it, like, things are going to be okay. It's really hard to get back up to the top of that pyramid where you're thinking, how will I tweak my productivity system? How should these two characters finish this scene? All of that stuff. So I think, what I'm trying to say is, like, just really give yourself a break on that, because you shouldn't be getting a ton of stuff done right now. Like, yeah, maybe now is a great time to learn Spanish or like take up cross stitching or, whatever it is, like take that mathematics course that you've been wanting to do for years. Like, but if you're not doing it, that's fine. The first week, I basically read thriller novels like all week long. That's all I did was sit and read. So whatever gets you through it, man. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, that answers my question. Great. I'm keeping myself muted because there's upstairs neighbors and my spouse and pets, and I know it might just a bad combination. No, that actually makes a ton of sense and is lined up with a lot of, like, honestly, what I've been feeling and seeing from therapists too, on like, just like, give yourself a break. You don't need to be productive. So I asked this of Laura Foster, but I wanted to ask this of you. What was it like to write from chaos to creativity? Did you like have an outline? Like, how did you start building how to build a productivity system book?
Yeah. I basically kind of started with buckets of research. I mean, I have been a huge fan of reading productivity books for forever. And so I already had like buckets of tips, like here's stuff about your workspace, or here's stuff about how to organize your day. So I just kind of started moving all of those tips and things that I'd already collected and organizing them into something that started to form the outline of the book, which was basically how to plan to work, how to troubleshoot your system once, if it's not working. And then because it's a book for creative people, it also has sections on how to play and how to dream and how to build that into your day and into your system, because it has to be part of your system. Because if you're a creative person, then if you're not inputting, you're not going to be able to output. And that, to me, is the hardest thing. The learning to relax, taking time to play, learning to chill out a little bit. But yeah, so I basically then started interviewing people who I knew kind of had something to say about that certain aspect of it, like Laura Vanderkam, who wrote 168 Hours, which is probably, I haven't read it for several years, but at the time it was definitely one of my favorite books on finding time. Her idea is like, you've got 168 hours in the week, and what do you do with all of those hours to make them count? And she and I speak that same language of like, let's fill every minute. If you're watching TV, you should also be doing this. If you're waiting for something in the microwave, do a plank. Like stuff that I've honestly had to step back from. And I think this, like I was saying about being compassionate to yourself, I think hopefully one of the lessons that I personally am taking away from this quarantine situation is like, be more chill, Jessie. It's okay. You don't have to be doing that plank while you're waiting for your thing in the microwave. So apparently I'll just keep coming back to that all night. But yeah, so I then started to find people to interview to talk about the different aspects that I wanted a little bit more enlightenment on, or somebody's, personal perspective. Talk to a lot of kind of writer friends and dancer and designers and all sorts of creative people who all do things a little bit differently. And I think that was what I learned while I was writing the book. Was I originally sat down and I said, okay, here is the way I do things. Here's the way everyone should do them. So I'll write a book that details how I do them with evidence to support it, why this is the right way. And then, talking to a friend of mine who's a knitting pattern designer, and she's like, oh, that would never work for me. This is how I do it. Or talking to my husband who's like, oh, that's awful. Like I do it this way. I have to clean out my inbox. Otherwise it's just stressing me out. And he's got like 7 billion unread messages in his inbox. I don't know how he does it. Yeah, I see you're cringing too. But yeah, so that's what I was learning as I was writing the book, is like, okay, this can't be a book that's Jessie's way is the way. It has to be, what is your way and how do you find that? So it really took shape as I was writing it. And honestly, like the thesis completely changed from day one till when it finally got to you guys.
That's really fascinating, because I think that's really what makes the book stand out, is that it's not quite like any other productivity book out there, and that it's not like, this is how I do it, this is how you should do it. It's, here's the steps to make your system, and this is what I did in those steps, which just I'm a big fan of the book and recommend it to a lot of people I was gonna say at events, but I used to. Hopefully again soon. One thing I wanted to ask as well, because you've now mentioned that you, obviously you've written a nonfiction book. I know you're writing another one, and you're working on gangster novels. But I also know that you do freelance copywriting and all sorts of things. Do you just have like one productivity system that encompasses all of your creative pursuits? Or do you find that like developing them different ways for different things, or how does that work for you?
Yeah, that is such an interesting question. I was thinking about it when you sent it over earlier, and I'm not entirely. At first, I was like, no, they all are the same, and I was like, no, they're all different. And I think I've finally settled on on an answer. But essentially, I think all of the different types of writing that I do and the different creative projects, they all develop a little bit differently. But I keep track of all of the moving parts in the same way, if that makes sense. So you have to share. You're laughing so hard.
I'm so sorry. My spouse is making a fool of themselves right off camera, and I'm trying not to react. Please continue.
All right. I was saying, so I use Evernote to keep track of everything. I have basically different buckets for like different tasks that are related to like marketing a book or writing a book writing different books, any freelance work that I've got going on. And so I kind of collect all of my projects in different locations that way. But then I have sort of a master to-do list of like, this is what needs to happen this week. And I keep track of everything in there. So it's not like, here's household chores on this list and here's freelance work on this list. It's like, everything is in that same overall list, which is broken up by days of the week. So I'm like, okay, I can see on Wednesday I've got this really big deadline that I know is going to take most of the day. So I will put that marketing project that I want to get done this week on Thursday, or I know if I've got this deadline here, I'm going to have to do this on Tuesday and this on Monday. So that's how I keep track of all the different moving parts. But yeah, the writing projects are all slightly different. Like freelance work is fairly straightforward. It's like, interview this person, write this article, interview this person, write this article. So it's like, that's fairly formulaic, even though it's still very creative. Fiction is like, I don't even know how I write fiction sometimes. Like I told you, I just finished a draft of this book I've been working on for forever. And like every book, it's just, I get to the end and I'm like, I don't even know how I did it. So, it's a lot of like mulling things over and keeping in my mind and free writing and going back through my outline a million times and then talking to my husband about it. And so it's this very like free form process that's much harder to pin down. It's not like, okay, I know this article is going to take me 5 hours because there's going to be 30 minutes for the interview. There's going to be an hour for a transcription. Like, I can block that out. But with writing fiction, it's like, I can try to write 2,000 words today. I think I probably can, given where I am in the book and what else I have on my plate. Or maybe at a different stage in the book, it's just like, think about it for an hour, because like, I know I'm not going to get any actual good words out, but I do need to mull this stuff over. So I break up my tasks differently depending on what I know I can get done that day. As opposed to like, I know a lot of writers that are like, I write 1,000 words every single day. And some days I'm just not in that phase of the project. And then the nonfiction books, they're kind of a weird mix of both because I can chunk it out and be like, all right, schedule these interviews. I know how much time that's going to take. But like I said, in writing From Chaos to Creativity, it went from here's this idea, I know it'll be this big, to like, oh, wait, actually, I'm kind of more writing this. So there's a lot of kind of thinking and refocusing time that has to go into that. So for that, so the book that I'm working on right now for you guys, the Untitled Writing book, essentially what I'm doing for that is I'm just saying, okay, take a couple hours and read. So today I'm going to spend 2 hours reading and taking notes and seeing what comes of it.
I like that. I mean, hey, anything that gets you more reading time is certainly nothing to complain about. I think we've got it tentatively titled Write Like You Mean It is what we've got it titled on our chart right now.
I like it.
I don't know how many iterations From Chaos to Creativity went through, but I
think Ellie threw that out there and I was like, perfect. I am so bad at naming things. I hate naming things. So anytime somebody gives me a good name, I'm just like, I'm taking it.
We will sometimes go through like a dozen different names on the publishing production chart. Sometimes like we'll settle on a name, forget to change it in the publishing production chart, and then have to come up with a new name because we're like, that wasn't what we decided on, but we don't like that.
Oh no. And then nobody can remember the new name.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah. Yeah, naming things are like honestly the worst. So let's see. It doesn't look like we've had any audience questions yet, but I did want to welcome any latecomers to ask questions in the chat next to the YouTube video. I am keeping an eye on that. Did you, I know sometimes with live author events, you will do like a writing exercise or something. Did you want to do something like that with folks today?
Yeah, I thought about that. And it seems like right now everyone's in such different places. So I was trying to think of something that would be something that people could walk away from this from, and like that would be really helpful. So I guess, so instead of doing a live writing exercise where I'm going to say I take out a piece of paper and sit here for 5 minutes while we stare awkwardly at the camera, I kind of wanted to give people two different tools to maybe help if they're feeling a certain way. So for me, basically, I've been like vacillating wildly between either feeling super overwhelmed by everything that needs to get done, or like having, complete ennui about like, oh, nothing sounds interesting. Not quite boredom because there's still things to do, but I don't want to do any of them. And those are kind of two sides of the same coin, right? Like there's a list of things that need to get done. You're either overwhelmed by it or just so uninterested to the point that you're going to go back to bed, right? So the two things that have kind of helped me in either one of those extremes, in the first extreme where you're overwhelmed, I have an exercise that's in my book that I'm sure is in lots of books, but I call it the brain dump. And basically just like set yourself a timer for 5 minutes, write as fast as you can every single thing that's in your brain, like everything that your brain is trying to tell you to remember, because those things are getting in the way of you actually being able to see what's important right now. So once you've written down like hem the curtains and call grandma and, do the dishes and answer this super important client email, and, you can look at all that and be like, okay, so the important thing right now is probably to answer the super important client email, then call grandma tonight. Don't worry about the curtains. Don't worry about the dishes, so you can prioritize once you have an actual list. But when it's just all jostling around in your brain, it all feels equally important. And therefore it shuts you down. So I highly recommend that if you're feeling overwhelmed at all. If you're on the flip side and you are just completely unmotivated by anything, the thing that has worked for me, because I've found myself in that state quite a bit in the last couple months, is do whatever sounds the most interesting, which seems legit, right? But at least I keep finding myself being like, I need to do this. I need to do that. I need to write 2,000 words on this book, whatever it is. And none of those things sound interesting. And so I don't do any of them. I'm just like sitting there on my phone on the edge of the bed looking at Twitter instead. But if I allow myself to be like, okay, what do I feel like? I really feel like finishing that book I started last night. All right, whatever. I'm going to go read for a bit and then maybe I'll get motivated. And I find that helps, because then you're doing something that seems the most interesting to you. It then kind of sparks your appetite, whets your appetite maybe to do other things as well. And, it's helpful if maybe that thing was on your to-do list, like, I need to read this book as research for the writing book, and I feel like reading, so I'll read Stephen King's On Writing, and maybe that will motivate me to do something else. But it's also fine if it's like just something that seems fun, because then you've had fun and you remember what it's like to enjoy an activity. I yesterday went to ordered online from Collage and ordered a bunch of Sculpey. And I haven't played with like Sculpey clay since I was a kid. And I went and picked up my package, which is all like cutely wrapped. And I just like spent 3 hours playing with Sculpey yesterday. It was so much fun. And I got done. And I was like, oh, I feel energized to do other things. So I would say if you're super unmotivated to do anything, just don't force yourself to do something you don't want to do. Think about what is what is the most interesting thing? What actually sparks my interest right now? And if you follow those sparks of interest, then you have a better chance of kickstarting your desire to do literally anything else. Yeah, I was actually going to say this earlier when you asked how my productivity system had changed. I used to be really regimented in like, okay, from 8 to 10, I'm going to work on this. From 10 to noon, I'm going to work on this. And I have thrown all of that out the window. It's like, what do I feel like working on right now? I look at the things that need to get done today, and I do whatever feels most interesting at the moment. Because forcing myself to do what I had been doing of like, well, no, from 8 to 10 is this type of work, and 10 to noon is this type of work. I hated it. And if I was like, well, I'm supposed to do this afternoon, but whatever, I'm just going to take care of it now, then like I could get rolling on other stuff. So yeah, those are my 2 tools that I hope would actually help some people.
Yeah, and someone actually says this is great advice in the chat. So,
good.
Just off camera, actually, is my box of Sculpey that we spent several hours last night playing with in our apartment too. It's so much fun.
So relaxing.
It really is. We did get an audience question. What activities do you do to completely relax and clear your brain, like not work? What's your favorite not work activity?
I think, well, right now it's Sculpey. New favorite. I do a lot of sewing, and I find that to be really, to be somewhat relaxing. It doesn't, well, partly right now, like we're also in my sewing room. This is my office / my sewing room. And so there's a certain level of like, even if I'm sewing something, my computer's right here, my email's right here. And it's also like, it's active, you have to be thinking, okay, did I put these 2 pieces together, right? I do a lot of reading. Reading is fun, but there's also that part of my brain that's like, I'm reading this so that I can, read this book that's in my genre or something like that. So as a writer, there's a certain aspect of reading that is a little bit still work, even though it's very enjoyable. Right now, my husband and I are playing a lot of Witcher 3 together, which has been very fun. Very relaxing. Just bottle of whiskey, Witcher 3, killing dragons. I'm enjoying that. That and StarCraft if I'm on my own. So video games and Sculpey clay are the 2 things that I can legitimately say like, okay, this is not actual work.
I love that. That honestly sounds like what my last week or 2 have been too.
Yes.
just like Animal Crossing and Stardew Valley instead of The Witcher or StarCraft. I did have one more question for you. And what is, and this is like the worst question ever. So maybe like even top 5. What is your favorite writing advice book?
Oh yeah, that's hard. But it's a good question because right now I'm going through all of my writing advice books. And it's so hard to pick. I really love Twyla Tharp's book on creativity, The Creative Habit, I believe is what it's called. So it's not a writing advice book because she's a choreographer. But her advice on creativity and living a creative life, I think, is one of the most powerful books. It's next on my stack of books to reread, and I'm really looking forward to it. That one and the War of Art by Stephen Pressfield. That one and his follow-up to that, which name I cannot think of at the moment. But both of those are just kind of small meditations. Like he just has really short chapters of writing advice that he has learned over the years. And it's very, very powerful in terms of like realizing that every day, if you want to be a professional creative, and I don't mean like professional, like getting paid, but like if you want to treat your art, your craft in a professional manner, he talks a lot about, here's the things that you need to leave behind. You need to leave behind a lot of ego and your resistance to the work, and you just need to sit down and do it. And if you do that, you're giving your work the respect that it deserves. And there's not a turning point in that where you're like, oh great, okay, now I'm doing it. I'm a professional. It's like every day you have to make that choice over and over again. And on the one hand, that's scary advice, but it's also really reassuring advice, because there's so many days where you're like, oh my God, how am I even doing this? Like, why am I doing this? Why am I sitting down at this computer? And to have somebody who's written, novels that have been made into movies be like, yeah, you just have to keep doing it every day. And every day you're going to be like, am I real? So it's nice to hear. I always love it hearing from super established writers that they're just like, I don't even know what I'm doing either. Okay, good. And I did just reread Stephen King's On Writing, which I remembered really liking, and I was happy to remember that I like it again. It was good. Lots of just solid writing advice, but also a really, really interesting look into kind of how he has created worlds over the years and stories. And I think one of the interesting things that I didn't notice on the first read that I did on my reread is he doesn't know where he's going in his stories at all. He's just like, I just write and see where it goes. And you have to just talking about how you have to trust your inner storyteller to make those connections and plant seeds that will work later on. That's something I've had to learn a lot, especially right now with the series that I'm working on. It's I just finished the 5th book, and it wraps up this essentially like a 5-book story arc. And there's seeds that I planted in book 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 that now I'm seeing how they come together. Like, I didn't know what I was doing then, but I was like, this seems important. I'm going to write this sentence. And now it's paying off in this way that I'm just like, who wrote this? So it was very cool to see Stephen King being like, yeah, there's just something in your subconscious that knows how to tell a story, and you have to trust it. You have to trust that if your subconscious is like, no, leave that line in there, you're like, all right, something in this is going to work later on. So that was really cool advice. I think it's 3. I'll give you 3.
Top 3. That honestly, I hadn't heard of the first 2 that you mentioned, but I'm definitely going to have to check them out.
Yeah, they're fantastic.
Yeah. So I'm gonna see if there are any last questions coming in. But while people are typing, do you have any last words of encouragement or bits of advice that we haven't covered, that you want to leave people with?
No, I just, again, want to reiterate, like, be gentle with yourself. I'm looking over my notes here, and I did have one thing that I have not mentioned, which is setting timers. Setting timers is a great way to just get yourself going on something. And a timer like 15 minutes, just say, I just have to answer emails for 15 minutes, or I just have to sit here and look at the blank page that is my novel for 15 minutes. And once that's done, I can go do literally anything else. And normally by the time the timer goes off, I find at least it has gotten me going a little bit. And maybe I'm totally done and I'm like, okay, peace. I gave it the 15 minutes. Or maybe I'm now kind of into this chapter. So that's my other like brain hack advice is set yourself a timer and just see if you can sit there for the 15 minutes, the 30 minutes, whatever it is. And normally that'll help get you moving a little bit.
That's awesome advice. Thank you. Where can people find you online? If maybe, are you taking follow-up questions like on Twitter or anything if people have any? Or
Oh, sure, totally.
yeah.
Yeah, so jessiequak.com is the place that you will find. It's my central hub. So if you want to learn more about my copywriting for some reason, you can go there. There's a link to Chaos to Creativity. I've got a little website for that. JESSIEKWAK. And then I'm on Twitter at jquak. And yeah, if anybody has any questions, like feel free to shoot me a tweet there. I'll hang out on Twitter for the next couple hours while I'm in the next room playing Witcher with my husband. And if anybody has questions, let me know.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Jessie. I'm going to plug our next talk really quick. If you hang on, I'll take us offline. If you tune in next Thursday at 3 p.m. Pacific, Ellie Blue and Adonia Lugo will be talking about bicycle race, transportation culture, and resistance, and how this has changed during the pandemic, and talks about like making things more accessible. So thank you for tuning in today, and I hope to catch you next time. Bye.
Excellent. Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Okay, we're offline.